Welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for coming to tonight's dating class. Before I get into tonight's wonderful commentary and discussion, I'd like to put it out there for anyone in the audience, whether live or worldwide on Torah Anytime. Thank you so much for the wonderful and warm comments and for the requests for assistance. Anybody who needs help anywhere in the world on shidduchim or dating or shalom bayis, would like my assistance in analyzing a current shidduch, would like to get into or needs help as a shadchan, please reach out to me on WhatsApp or regular phone call or text at 305-206-1916. That's 305-206-1916. Or you can easily write me an email as well to drjackcohen18@gmail.com. drjackcohen18@gmail.com. I had the pleasure to be a student to one of the greatest rabbis in the world, Avigdor. Sometimes you don't appreciate how great an individual is until he's passed away, and then you come to read his Torah again and then realize how much less you knew it when you were younger and how much more you can pull out of it. I recall that when I grew up in New York and he was my Rebbi since 8th grade, I learned quite a bit from him. And then I moved to Miami Beach and there was a large picture of me and him in my dining room, and there were a lot of Baalei Tshuva who lived next to us in our block, and one of them came into my house and said, he saw the picture of me and Avigdor, and he says, "You knew him? You actually spoke to him?" And I said, "Yes, I did, quite often. Sometimes you think not enough." So tonight I'm going to dedicate tonight's entire shiur to some of the great wisdom that he brought down on dating and shalom bayis, and what timeless lessons we can learn from this great individual who was considered one of the greatest of the generation. But I'd like to start a question. I'd like to start tonight's discussion with a question that's asked of him. Should a girl prepare for a date by making herself attractive, doing her hair and makeup, or should the girl think that the boy that's destined for her from heaven will take her anyway? Great question, right? After all, if I'm determined or destined to be connected to a certain soulmate as a girl to a boy, then why should I bother having to get up, get dressed up, put my makeup on, etc.? And here's his phenomenal answer, the answer that's given by Avigdor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised our forefathers to give them Israel. He promised them Eretz Yisrael. He didn't give it to them unless they did their best to get it, which means it wasn't guaranteed. A promise from Hashem is only fulfilled when you, the human being, make the effort to go out and get it. What did they have to do? First of all, the Jews had to cry out of Mitzrayim. They had to cry out from the bottom of their hearts. They had to scream. They had to shout. They cried out. Finally, Hashem heard the cries of the Jews, and He said, "I'll help you, because I remember the covenant that I made with Avraham Avinu." The answer is, there could be a covenant. The bris bein habesarim, which He made with Avraham Avinu. It's a covenant. But in order for you to get what you want from Hashem, you have to activate the covenant. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to work very hard for the promise to come true. And finally, when He took them out of Mitzrayim, they came to Eretz Canaan. It didn't happen right away. It took them 7 years. They had to conquer the land. There was war. There was conquest. 7 years of war. Why did they have to fight for the land? Wasn't it promised to them? The answer is, Hashem promises us some things, and if you'll win after all that effort, His promise will come true because you made the effort. And so let's go back to the boy and the girl. And so here's the boy that's destined for the girl, right? And he's a lamdin, or he goes to yeshiva, or he's a worker, whatever it may be, right? And his name is written right next to yours on the invitation, printed in Shemayim. It's supposed to be that this boy is supposed to marry this girl. And your name is there, and his name is there, right on the heavenly invitation that you're supposed to be for each other. But you better get energetic about it, says Rabbi Miller. Otherwise, it will never be delivered to you. That invitation has been written in Shemayim. It has your name on it as the girl, and your name on it as the boy. But if you're not energetic to go get that invitation, it's not going to come. The postman will get mixed up on the way. You see, there's a religious guy. He doesn't care about the hair. He cares about hair. He cares a lot about your hair. I told this to girls all the time. What do you look like? I want to see a picture of you before you go out. Take a selfie. Let me see what you look like. And I ask questions all the time. What do you wear? How do you do your hair? It's very important. You think the boy doesn't care? He cares plenty. He's so innocent. He thinks you were born with the curls. He doesn't know that it takes 3 hours to make those curls. So get busy and spend those 3 hours. Work very hard so that the promise should come true. Again, a promise that's given to Hashem is only on the fact that you're energetic to go and make sure to activate that promise. Now, I just want to make a very interesting point. This week I had a shidduch that I was involved in where I felt that the boy and the girl were really made for each other, and then we had a lot of problems because one of the references on the boy's resume did a very horrible job to the boy. He spoke very badly about him. Terrible things. We had to take the man off the resume. And now I have to try to undo this damage. So please make sure, those of you out there who have dating resumes, when was the last time you checked in with your references to determine if they're on your side? What do they have to say? Perhaps have someone call. I've done this. I've called up anonymously for people just to see what the references have to say. This was a shidduch that I worked on in a long time for a certain boy and a certain girl, and there was a pretty influential individual on the resume who went and did his best to destroy that shidduch. So make sure that you've checked out your references to see if they're still loyal and dedicated to you. Okay, let's start with tonight's talk called The Unwritten Kesubah, a conversation and a dialogue with Avigdor. Let's begin with the subject of the Kesubah, which is an ancient document that we still use till today, which is signed by the groom. The groom promises, Ani eflach, I'm going to work. Flach means he's going to do any kind of work in order to support his wife. Some people today, no, I won't take that job, and I won't take this job, and this is below me. I was involved in a shidduch where the woman flew into New York to date, and very nice person, and her friends were a little bit unhappy with what the man is doing for a living. Nice, respectable thing, but it wasn't good enough for the friends. But the point is, this is what he was doing for a living, and he was putting food on the table. So number one is that you are promising that you'll work. Ve'olkir, I'm going to honor. You promise to give covet to your wife. Covet doesn't mean you won't be his wife, mistreat her. Covet means he's going to give her more honor than he gives his friends, his work associates, his yeshiva partners. He doesn't make a kesubah with other people. He promises to honor his wife more than other people. Not take her for granted. And vice versa. She can't take him for granted. And it also says in the kesubah v'azin, I'm going to support her. Which means even though I'm capable of supporting you without work, work is not enough. You have to take the money from your work and you have to physically give it to your wife. One of the key areas that I tell girls to look out for when they're dating is the man cheap? Is he generous? Will he give the money? Because a person who's not generous, who's a kamsan, who doesn't give his wife money, he literally puts her into a life of Gehenna. So that's important. Not only does he make the money, but does he actually hand it to the wife in order for her to be able to cover her expenses and the expenses of the household. Vaparnes, I'll furnish with your needs. It's not only food you have to have, in addition to food, other things according to the normal standards of the time. So you're obligating yourself. And it says, Keilchos Guvrin Yehudayin. This is the obligation of Jewish men. A Jew has different obligations, although in the entire world they take on certain obligations, but nothing like the obligations of a Jewish husband. A Jewish husband has more obligations. They work, they honor, they support, and they furnish the wife with all her necessities. They do it be'emes, with truth. It means not merely to be just yotze public opinion, to look like you're a good guy. You have to be a person who actually is a true person to your wife. What does it mean to him? It means that he has to earn his income, and he's supposed to support the family from the money. A woman is supposed to do the work in the house when she's not busy with the children, and that means that she has to cook and clean. If she can earn a few dollars by spinning or weaving cloth in the house, or something not too difficult, that's her duty to help out. That the woman has to help the man as well, not to get a job, to go outside the home. She's mechoyev to do that, but in the house, whatever she has to do to help out, she can help out. As it says in Eshes Chayil, that he describes the righteous woman. She helps out, she does whatever she can to help the man financially. Now we must know that besides all the things that are mentioned in the Kesubah, there's a great unwritten Kesubah as well. We're going to study today what's in the unwritten Kesubah. One is, the Gemara tells us, Ve'ahavta recha kamocha. You're mechoyev to love the person like yourself. You, the husband, must love the wife like yourself. You, the wife, must love the husband like yourself. What does that mean exactly? A man should not marry a woman he doesn't like, because he won't be able to fulfill the point of Avta lecha kamocha. I have one of my clients who married a woman. He now has 5 children, and he married her under coercion, even though he didn't like her, because the rabbis told him, you'll get to like her. Terrible mistake. You're supposed to like the person. You're supposed to be attracted to the person, not on any future considerations. So once you marry her, then you better get going in the obligation of doing what you have to do. A woman who tells somebody, I hate my husband, I can't stand him, she's making a maximal cardinal sin. You can't hate your husband. And even if you do, you shouldn't say it, ever. You're mechuyev to love your husband. You have to work on it. You can't say, I hate my wife. You're mechuyev to love her. I had a fascinating story that happened to me today. It's amazing. I saw an individual I didn't see in 3 years. He told me an incredible story. Through an incredible set of circumstances, he was put in jail for 11 months. A totally wacky story. I'm not in a position to tell you the details. However, while he was out, his wife left him. He came out. He's now suing for $500 million. He'll probably get a good portion of it for what was done to him. But where's our loyalty to him? And he's trying to go back to her. He asked me today, Dr. Jack, could you talk to her, please? She doesn't want to know from me. And they're having a daughter and getting married in a few weeks. Where's the loyalty? Where's the loyalty? You promised you're going to be for each other, as one body, as one unit. It makes no sense to me. So you may have to work on it. You're never supposed to say things, I hate him or I hate her. And if you do, little by little, she gains that feeling. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you love me, then you have to love my people. He's the son of your people, so you can't say, I hate my husband. The fact that he's your husband obligates you to concentrate on him more than anyone else. Hashem loves people. Hashem loves short people. Hashem loves fat people. Hashem loves people who have handicaps. Hashem loves us all, which means we have to emulate Hashem and love the Jewish people as well. And it starts with our spouse. Let's say your wife, you see her in the street, and she gave you a good tongue lashing that day when she walked out of the house, and you're angry at her, and you see her walking in the street. You know what your response is supposed to be? Avigdor tells us you're supposed to say, I love that woman. In spite of whatever happened with us in our argument. You have to work on it, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you reward. But you have to know that it's part of the Kesubah, even though it's not written in the Kesubah, and not serious. In addition to all the requirements of the Torah, you have to remember, Hashem made man in the image of Hashem. Look at your husband. Look at your wife. You're seeing God when you look at your spouse. My husband's Hashem. My wife is Hashem. Absolutely. Train yourself. When you look at each other, you're seeing God. You're seeing a picture of God when you look at your spouse. If you're looking at your wife, now nobody else's wife, but at your wife, you look and you see Tzelem Elokim. It's a picture of Hashem. There's no question about it. That's Rosh Hashem. Even a face that's ill-formed, ill-favored, it's the face of a religious Jew. It's Tzelem Elokim. It makes no difference. Your wife, you're Sholi Mechuyev. You have to work on always saying, I love that person. And say it to her, and say it to him. It says in the Torah, Baruch. Anybody who gives you a blessing, who gives a blessing to a fellow Jew, to a religious Jew, is going to be blessed. It's a tremendous contract that Hashem made. You bless my people, and I'll bless you. Therefore, when the husband blesses his wife, she doesn't have to hear. He should always say, I'm blessing my wife. I'm giving her a tremendous blessing, that she should be happy, that she should be healthy. If you say it to her, no harm. But you think these words and say these words and say, Hashem says, that's your duty. And I'm going to give you bracha for blessing your wife. You can make each other happy. But it's important to bless a fellow Jew. Now, which fellow Jew should you concentrate on most? Your wife, your husband. You have to bless each other. So instead of saying things against your husband or against your wife, chas v'shalom, which means it's like you're cursing them, because whoever curses you will be cursed. Instead, bless them, and you'll be blessed in return. Bringing up the family is definitely part of the obligation of the Kesubah. And bringing up the family is very important, and it's a big subject. First of all, a child should never hear one parent belittling the other parent. Chas v'shalom, that's ironclad. Never should a child hear the father say anything bad about the mother. Never should the mother say anything bad about the father. And even though you're not saying anything, if she's shouting at you, that's like belittling you. You can't shout at your husband when the children are around. You can't shout at your wife when the children are there. Number one, you never shout in front of the children. You have to be careful to teach each child what kivud avayim means. That's part of the obligations of I'm going to honor each other, which you guys agreed to when you got married. Respect Abba, you have to tell the children. Respect Tati, whatever you call him. Always get up when your father comes in. Try to serve your father. Bring him a glass of water. These are the things that you're obligated to teach your children. The mother should train the children in the obligations of Kibbud Av, which are many. And the father should train the children that should respect their mother. And always get up when the mother comes into the room. You can't sit at a table when your mother comes to you. You get up and take from her what she needs. Don't criticize your mother's food, ever. The husband also should never criticize his wife's food. Never do that. Never. Never, no matter how unpleasant it is. You can say you're not hungry if you want, but you don't criticize the food. And keep out of the kitchen. Don't give advice to your wife how to manage the kitchen or how to manage the house. Don't tell her that the house is not clean. Don't criticize at all. That's not a big order. It's very simple. These are certain things that are more difficult than that, but these are the first basic requirements to a happy marriage. The principle of giving honors in the Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us, Ezu mechubad, who is honored? HaMechabed et b'riot, he who honors all of creation. It does not say there he who honors just Jews. You have to honor everyone if you expect to be honored. Those who honor me, I shall honor. We're talking about honoring people. So, what does that mean to us? Greet every person with simcha, even if you're not happy to see them. So when your husband comes home, show him not a scowling face. Show him a happy face. Show him a friendly face. Fake it until you make it, is what I tell everyone. I had someone come to me tonight who's starting dating for the first time. She's shaking. I said to her, you don't smile. I want you to go into your bedroom, lock the door, look at the mirror, and smile 100 times for me. At the mirror. It's very important to make it part of your nature to always smile. When you see your wife, show her a friendly face. What's in your heart? Let's say if you're worried about money, you're worried about your business or other things, that's none of your business right now. Right now, the first and most important thing, you have to show the spouse a smile. It's a Mishnah. You know, right? This is to be taught to the children. Even from the early stage, a child should be taught to greet their father and their mother with happiness. That's part of the Kesubah. Now suppose a man, let's talk about a second marriage. Suppose a man lost his wife, God forbid, and there's a stepmother in the house now. And this all the time happens with me when I read many shidduchim for widows and widowers. I'm very involved in this. And just this past week, I had this case this past week with a woman from out of town dating a man. She has 4 children and he has 3. And they've been going out for a while. He's come over quite often to the house. They don't like him. No matter what happens, they don't like this guy. They don't like him. So I called a couple that I knew that had done a great job. I had been their guest. They were my hosts in out of town when I recently lectured out of town. And I asked them, what's the rule regarding people getting married? You came into your marriage with 3 kids, and your wife had 3 kids. They subsequently had 2 kids of their own. They have now a nice blended family of 8. They said to me, if the children don't like the man, forget about it. You have to ensure that they respect him and they like him. And if they don't like him, they better go to family therapy, because there's no way they can get married if the children don't like the father or the man that's dating the mother, or vice versa. The children have to be on board. So, let's see what Rav Miller has to say about this. Suppose a man lost his wife, and there's a stepmother. And guess what? He made a Kesubah with that new wife. And including the Kesubah, he's going to honor his new wife. So it means he must make up with his children beforehand. Children, you're getting a new mother now. A new mother. Our mother, the old mother, is in Gan Eden. And they say, never mind, we're not interested. And it's your obligation to honor your mother. He has to report back to the kids. And you have to make a bris with them beforehand. And each one has to promise. They're going to take a promise. They're going to honor the stepmother like it's their mother. I know that this man told me, the person that I just referred back to that did a great job with his new wife, and they have a great family. He sat all the kids down. The 3 that he had from his first wife, the 3 that he had from the 3 that she had, the new wife, and the 2 ones. He said, there's no such thing as step brother or step sister. We're all one family. We're all brothers or all sisters. It's included in the Kesubah. And don't make the mistake. If a man marries again without telling his children beforehand, who knows what can result from that? Who is a smart person? He prepares for the future. Unfortunately. So the husband who's marrying a second wife, must make it his business to instruct his children that he's about to do so. He can't just spring it on them as a surprise. He must tell his mother-in-law, the first mother-in-law, that he's about to take in a new wife. Although she's very much embittered when a strange woman comes into the house that her daughter was in charge of. He has to tell the mother-in-law, the former mother-in-law, please, I ask you, give my wife the best respect you can. I'll be so grateful to you. Now, suppose the children call up and say, Tati, can we come over for Shabbos? He should not say yes. He shouldn't say yes right away. Did he ask his new wife? Did he get permission for her? So he tells his children, call the mother up and ask her. She's the boss. He has to validate his new wife completely. It's a big mistake if he says yes, she's going to cook for them, she's going to wash the dishes, they'll sit at the table like they're aristocrats, and she'll serve them, and the first thing he should say, you want to come for Shabbos? It's not my department. Call my new wife. Get permission from her. She's not a slave. And even that's not sufficient. Beforehand, he has to make a tanai with them. After mommy consents, make sure you won't sit at the table. She should sit at the table, and you should serve, and you should take the dishes off the table. The new mother is not your servant, is not your slave. Lehefech, the opposite. The children have to respect and honor and serve the new mother, the father's new wife. It's very important to make arrangements that the children who come to visit should know that the mother is their mother and treat her like that. They should not go into another room and talk about the good old days when mommy was alive. Nothing doing, Rabbi Avigdor says. In this house, this is the mother. And she's alive. Don't talk until she comes in. She has to sit down and she has to be the center of the conversation, not to feel excluded in any way. You can't shoulder her off as if she's a stranger. Therefore, you need to make preparations. That's included in the portion of Ani Okir. I will value my wife. He has to honor her. And therefore, he has to make up with his stepchildren. That's her stepchildren beforehand, that when they come to visit and when they sit down to talk, they should wait until mama is ready to sit down with them. And they should talk only those things that she likes to hear. Don't speak about conversation that she can't communicate with and participate in, which will make her feel excluded. Don't talk about the olden days when the first mother was around. Forget about it. You can talk in your own house, but not here. If you want to come and visit me, he's talking about his children or his stepchildren. There's no discussion of the former wife, of the former mother. Of course, there are obligations that she has, right? It's her obligation to love her stepchildren, and when she has to say some tochacha, which is to criticize, she should not say it with venom, because obviously the children that come into her life from her new husband are not her maternal children. She has to be careful how she criticizes his kids. She should not do it with the poison of a stepmother. She should say it with a little bit of honey, like she speaks to her own kids. If there's a little boy not being respectful to her, she has to pat him on the cheek. Moishala, you're a good boy, but you have to do this and you have to do that. That's how to talk to your stepson. Now we're going to go a little further back. Part of the Kesubah is the preparation for getting married. Preparation? What are you talking about, Rabbi Miller? That's part of the Kesubah? Absolutely. Let's talk about preparation to get married. If you don't prepare for marriage, then the Kesubah will never be fulfilled. Let's say, here's a religious man. He goes to shul every day. Sometimes he goes to classes. Maybe he always goes to classes. And he's looking for a shidduch. Maybe he always goes to classes, right? Somebody proposes him to a girl. The first question she has to ask is, does he work? You heard that? Does he work? That's number one. That's next. First, does he work? If he doesn't work, forget about it. Get rid of him. If he doesn't work. And work does not mean once in a while. He has to have a steady job. Right? A Baal Tshuva who's already in the late 20s, you can't expect him to sit in Kollel, in a Beis Medrash, and loaf the rest of his life. Nothing doing. You don't want him. Let him stay where he is. Now, work is extremely important in marriage. He says, Ani aflach, I'll support, I'll go to work for you. For he promised it in the Kesubah. If he's not capable of working, forget about him. Don't even start the shidduch at all. If he's a yeshiva man, well, that depends. If he's young, he still learns in yeshiva, then it's an asset. If he's in yeshiva and you get married to him, it's a yeshiva shechasana, okay, that's good. And even though he won't remain in yeshiva forever, when he goes out, it's settled as a yeshiva family. But of course, you must understand, you're not being capable of being a Rosh Yeshiva, you're not capable of being a Magid, you're not capable of being a Rebbi or a Rav, then you have to get busy, learn a trade, There are plenty of trades around in the world. Take the yellow pages and look through all the various jobs and professions and make up your mind and get busy doing something to earn a living. You have to train yourself for a parnasa. Otherwise, you're not loyal to the promise you made in the Kesubah, which is ani eflach, I will support. By the way, while we're on the subject, Rabbi Avigdor says, I must speak harshly about those Baal Tshuva who come into the world of Torah and they make a profession of schnorring, which is to put your hand out to ask for donations. He's a Baal Tshuva, and out he goes. He puts on a black hat, he grows a big beard, and he goes around to the Bate Midrashim collecting money. That's a Baal Tshuva? No. That's the Jewish people should support him? He stands on the street and he begs? What does that mean? It's a Chilul Hashem. That's what it is. We don't need you. Of course we're happy to have Baal Tshuva. We want to encourage people to come back to Hashem. But make up your mind, you're going to be a mensch that's part of the Tshuva. And a mensch has to work. And even though he's not married, he must work. How great is work, the Torah tells us. Gedol ha-melacha shemechabed es ba'aleha. That it uplifts, greatest work for it uplifts you. It makes something out of you. Now, among the obligations when you have a family, every child must help out in the house. Let's talk a little about chinuch. You must train your children to take out the garbage and wash the dishes. Yes, boys should be taught to wash dishes. Girls should be taught to wash more dishes and do more in the house. Train the girls to cook. Train the girls to bake. Even little girls can learn how to bake. Some little girls are great bakers. I can attest to this in my own house, thank God. And it'll be a great help for them later in life when they're married. But right now it's a success for a child if he or she contributes to the home. Sweeping up, picking up things from the floor, straightening out the house. Every child must be given chores. And don't be lazy about it. Make it a strict business and keep an account on the children. Even if they're doing their duty. Every child must help out in the house. Every child has to be home at night by 10 o'clock. And that's very important. You need to know, where is my son and where's my daughter? That's very important. There must be a strict schedule. Not only that, even bigger children. If you want to move out of the house, chas v'shalom. She wants to take an apartment by herself, the daughter, nothing doing. Get married and then move out. And marry them off as quickly as possible before the age of 21. Otherwise they get too smart and they get too choosy. I had a woman come in front of me yesterday. I felt so bad for her. 31-year-old son, 25-year-old daughter still at home. Too choosy. And the girl gets dates left and right. Because she let her get too picky, too choosy, and let her hang out. When she's still young, she doesn't have too much sense. You can marry her off to a good boy and you can choose. Right? So it's important to always make it our business to marry them off as quickly as possible. Here's a great point. When we're talking about making conditions of marriage in a Kesubah, it's very important for a couple to talk over things before they get married. Among the things they should talk over, he should say, or she should say, would it be a good idea if we were under the supervision of a rabbi for the first 3 years? Oh, how great that is. Supervision, you ask? Who's supervision? Let's say a Rav, that's an idea, or the Rebbi that I learned under the yeshiva, and we'll make up our minds that for the first 3 years, any dispute between us will be resolved by him. How many times have I seen this work out to saving marriages? I've told the story of a girl who came to me from the 5 towns, who was married literally 6 months and her marriage was falling apart. The chassan, who had learned in a very prestigious yeshiva in Israel, came back and they got married. And he went from learning 3 hours a day to 2.5 hours to 2 hours to an hour and a half to an hour to a half hour to 10 minutes to davening at home. And she thought that I was going to tell her to divorce him. I said, nothing doing. Does he have a Rebbi? She said, yes. I said, go to the Rebbi now. Tell him to get involved. And the Rebbi got involved and saved the marriage. So this would be a good idea that when a couple gets married, they should agree between each other that they will allow each other to have a Rebbi between them, either his Rebbi or hopefully his mentor, and they'll take any disputes stand. Because I always ask girls when we decide, when I sit with girls, whether it's locally or throughout the world, and I do this on WhatsApp, let's create a top 10 list. The first thing I put on the top 10 list that a girl needs is that the boy has to have a Rebbi. He has to have a mentor. You have to have someone that both of you should be able to go to for direction, for solving a dispute, so that he could save the marriage if chas v'shalom is a problem. It's important that the chassan has a Rebbi. If he tells you he doesn't have one, beware. There'll be no one to keep him in line. So if you have no Rebbe, who are you going to speak to when there's a crisis, when there's a problem? Don't marry a man without a Rebbe. Avigdor tells us. Let's say you're in this Kehila, whether it's Satmar, or whether it's Ashkenaz or Hasidish, whatever it may be, you have someone to go to, that's the Rebbe. That's very important. Now, some interesting points of chinuch. Among the things we have to do in bringing up our children correctly is not to accustom the kids to too many luxuries. It's very important. There's a new minhag in America, the Rav writes, a winter vacation. In Europe, there was no such thing as a winter vacation. Even the summer vacation they didn't have. The rabbi writes, I remember when I was in yeshiva in Slobodka in Europe, there was no vacation during the summer. Pesach and Sukkot, those are the only vacations. And when there's a vacation and you take the children out of town and they travel and they get accustomed to hotels, it's poison. You're accustoming the children into spending money. They get ideas in their heads and it's boring to stay home. This is the classic line today. I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. We hear it all the time. We've created this problem for ourselves. We shot ourselves in the proverbial foot. We have to teach our children, if they have spare time, to spend it at home. Boys should go learn and spend their time in their base measures. There's no such thing as letting time go by for nothing. Summer vacation, chas v'shalom, either the boy's learning in camp, where he's learning every day, or he's learning in the city. A father must know, where is my son all day long, or where is my daughter all day long. You have to know where your children are. And don't accustom them to travel. Don't accustom them to expensive things in the house either. It says in the Gemara, Hizharu b'bnei aniyim, be careful of the children of the poor. Shemehen tetzei Torah, because from them Torah will come. One of the best examples was Rav Yosef, who grew up dirt poor, had nothing, couldn't afford to buy books. He used to go into the Sfarim stores to look at the book and memorize the book because he couldn't afford to buy it. And look what he became, a great superstar. Okay, now here's an important point when you're taking in a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law. Very important politics. You must make a contract with your husband or wife. You're never going to criticize your son-in-law or daughter-in-law. Very important advice. Even when they're not listening, you won't say anything ever to your wife or your husband against your son-in-law or your daughter-in-law. Never say a word of criticism about him to anybody, including your husband and your wife. If your daughter ever complains to you about your husband, tell her, please, I don't want to hear it. Don't get involved in the children's disputes. This is one thing that Avigdor taught us. It was so important. Don't talk about your marriage to your parents, ever, ever, ever. That's to your Rav, Rebbi, mentor, or therapist. That's it. Because they're going to feel bad for you. They're going to take your side. They're going to put fire in the water, in the oil, and then you got to imagine a horrible inferno. If a man complains about his wife to his mother, he's doing a tremendous sin. The mother-in-law is waiting for that so she could just attack the daughter-in-law. Therefore, she make it his business never to say a word. Don't talk to your parents about your marital affairs. Let me repeat that. Don't talk to your parents about your marital affairs. When parents mix in, let's explain what happens. When husbands and wives have a fight, nature makes it they get together frequently, and they forgive each other to a certain extent. But once one of the parents gets angry at the chassan or the kala, there's no way of being mevater anymore. It's forever. You need literally a miracle to bring it back together. Here's an example the Rav writes of a mother-in-law, an intelligent mother-in-law. She comes and tells her daughter-in-law, I'm giving you an ultimatum. You must go to a psychologist. She's crazy. First of all, she should go to a psychologist? And you're giving your daughter-in-law an ultimatum? What does that mean? Who are you to give her an ultimatum? No one should give anyone an ultimatum. A husband and a wife should not give ultimatums either, but a mother-in-law should give an ultimatum to her daughter-in-law? Who ever heard of something like that? Absolutely not. Therefore, always praise your son-in-law. Always praise your daughter-in-law. And heap on the praises. And don't give them any suggestions what to do. Don't give them any advice. Ever. Don't give any advice to your daughter-in-law. Even though you mean well. The only thing you can give is money or covet. Otherwise, don't give anything else. Now, you have many good fathers-in-law who think that it's their duty to give guidance to their son-in-law. and tell them, do this and do that, well, guess what? It's bitter for a son-in-law to take advice from his father-in-law. Therefore, in his heart, he becomes an enemy of the father-in-law. So even though you're a tzaddik and you think you mean his best, and you have his best welfare at heart, don't give him advice. It's not your problem. Don't get involved with his son-in-law. Now, when a man is marrying, he should make it his business that he'll never say a word about his wife, to criticize her to anyone in the family. To criticize your wife, tremendous mistake. A husband or a wife should never speak to anyone else about their affairs. Your marital affairs are completely private. Don't go to your father-in-law or mother-in-law to complain against your husband, chas v'shalom. They'll think that you are the one that's wrong, and all you'll do is get enemies. Never speak to your brothers and sisters against your husband or your wife. It should be a chok v'lo ya'avor, a principle that is never transgressed, that you should never tell anyone in your family about your marriage. And it should be remembered at all times. At all times, keep it in mind that if you have anything to say, it should be something good, but never criticism of your husband or wife to anybody. Besides the fact that it's all you should not become a gossiper in your nation. Now, a word about those who are not married. The obligation in the Kesubah is towards your partner that you're marrying, but there's an unwritten Kesubah that you have to find the partner to make such an obligation with. So it's of utmost importance that everybody get going and get married. When a young man doesn't marry, he's a criminal. He loses his chelik in olam haba. And this is serious, Avigdor writes. Chizkiah HaMelech was very busy building Torah in the Jewish nation. He was considered one of the greatest kings in Jewish history. In his time, there wasn't a base medrash that didn't have oil lamps burning at night. He had the whole nation learning Torah 24/7. He gave oil so that people could study Torah. Everybody was learned in his time. Little children knew the laws of Torah and Tumah by heart. Tzaddikim Gedom today don't know it. Now, if you're going to die, still he became very ill and he was close to death. He sent for the Navi, Yeshaya, and he told him, you're going to die and you won't live. And if you're going to die, why does it say you won't live? Chizkiah won't live in the next world either, because he didn't have kids. You have to get married and you have to have children. Here's an older man who's already in his late 30s. How many children he lost the opportunity to have? He could have had a nice family by now. He should know what a great avera, what a great sin he's doing. I once spoke to a man. He told me he turned down 100 girls. Finally, he married a moon-faced girl, and she was too old to have kids after he turned down 100 good ones. He should know what a tremendous sin he did. Of course, he would be very angry if he heard me say that. I'm afraid he doesn't have a chelik in olam haba. He could have gotten married. He was a good-looking young man. When he was 22, he couldn't get a shidduch? Certainly he could have. He turned down one girl after the next. But now, not even one child. Terrible. So part of the obligation of the Kesubah is to make sure you can be able to sign one. You must get married. Older Baalei Tshuva don't like them when they hear this, but even older Baalei Tshuva, it's so easy for them. They're mechuyev to get married. There's another reason to get married. Besides having children, you have to get married in order to become a decent human being in this world. If you live by yourself, you do whatever you wish. You have no necessity for self-control. You throw things on the floor. You throw your stockings or socks on the floor. Everything in life is in disorder. If you have a wife, she bosses you around. She tells you to put this in this place and that in that place. You have to be kovesh et yitzro. Sometimes you're already you want to get upset, but you can't because you have to bite your tongue. You have to listen to her. She has to listen to you, or act as if you're listening. You have to say yes to each other. Yes, dear. And little by little, you train yourself to be a mensch. This goes as well for the man as it goes for the woman. You smooth out your character when you're married, because marriage is a clinic in character perfection. And even though you're too old to have children, you must get married. If a man lives without a wife, the Gemara tells us, he lives without Torah, he lives without Kedusha, he lives without Simcha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers the man who doesn't marry a sinner. Everybody must have a mate. Of course, if you don't work, you won't be able to support someone. It's an excuse. So you have to learn how to make a living. There are plenty of jobs you can get, and you'll be able to support your wife. Marry an old woman. You can't marry a young woman, but you must get married, whatever it takes. No such thing as being single. Now that seems queer today. Many older people are single and they think that if they go to shul every day that they're righteous people. And they don't realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu frowns on them. When there's a fight, it's a major error and a great sin. And if he says, I won't give you any money for this week. It happened a number of times. And that person is first of all a Rasha. The Kesubah says he has to support his wife. And even though he would give her the money by saying it alone, it's like saying, I'm rebelling. And now one more thing the Rabbi says. If a woman goes on strike against her husband, she's a criminal. If she refuses to go to the mikveh, she's a criminal. She has an obligation to go to the mikveh. She should never utilize the law against her husband to get an order of protection to throw her husband out of the house. Chas v'shalom. It's his house at least as much as her house. If she doesn't like the house, she has the right to go out of the house and finished. She can't tell him to go out of the house though. If she makes a revolt against her husband and she refuses to go to the mikveh, she has to know she's destroying the marriage. It's like a bomb. She should know that for every year she's losing an opportunity to have a child. There's going to be tremendous punishment for that. The Rambam says if you're Mosif another child, it's like you build a whole world. One more child, and he didn't have children because of revenge. Nekama is more important than having children. No question, this person has lost their chelik in Olam Haba for refusing to go to the mikveh. And the money they spent on lawyers, his lawyer and her lawyer, they could have taken that money and divided it and lived happily ever after. Tremendous amounts of money are spent for nothing. A man's foolishness ruins his way of life, and he blames God. Why did you do this to me, Hashem? Hashem says, who did it to you? You did it to yourself. You caused yourself to have problems in life. You chose your actions, and now you want to come and blame Hashem for that? Who told you to break up? Why don't you treat your wife like a mensch? Why don't you treat your husband like civilly? Why did you rebel against your husband or wife? Why did you say that you won't go to the mikveh anymore? Both of you are to blame, and you're both going to get it. Oh, you'll both get it. There's an Olam Haba, you'll both get it, but don't blame Hashem. The rabbi says, I met a woman who stopped me in the street, and she said, Rabbi Miller, I'm divorced 22 years, and I'm sorry I ever did it. Now she admits she's sorry. Even if her husband has been a mean fellow, still a husband is better than no husband. And sooner or later you'll get used to each other. Sooner or later you'll know how to deal with each other. A little bit better. A little more diplomacy. There's always ways and tricks of doing things. Let me read you an incredible story which I saw, which is so amazing. It really validates the points that we made today. Listen to this amazing story. I hesitate to tell this story because it hurts so much. It contains details that I prefer that I wish I could forget, and certainly not to publicize. I come from a traditional family. Initially, we were not very observant. But since my parents sent all of us children to religious schools, to Dati schools, we gradually became a frum religious home. I was an exceptionally good girl, a real tzaddikus, a righteous woman. And I stayed that way as I grew up. I'm telling the truth about this, and I'm going to tell the truth about what came later, although it's not so complimentary about me. I married a Ben Torah, a person who was a good, solid student in Torah, from a fine, frum family. We both had high aspirations to build a great home based on Torah, and to raise our children in the same fashion. We were so pure and so innocent. How I wish I could have that innocence again. We had 6 children, closely spaced. My husband was a model husband. I was a model wife. He was the king in our home, and I was the queen. We would sit and learn halacha together. We were devoted to each other's needs, and together we were devoted to our children. So far, so good. For 10 years it was like that. Today I look back on those years and yearn for the life that I had. But we needed money, and I found a job with a company that paid a good salary. Some of the women who worked there were religious. Some of the women who worked there were not religious. For the first month or so, I was working and focusing on my work and my paycheck. I came in, I did my work, I didn't chat with my workers, my co-workers, and I just basically did a good job and I went home. And then Esther came into my life. Esther was a non-religious woman in her 50s, a kind woman who acted like a mother to all the younger women in the office. She had no children. In fact, she'd never been married, and she lavished all her warmth on us. Esther found a place in our heart. I became good friends with her. Big mistake. And don't ask me how, but eventually she drew me into her world. Not that she preached against religion, she simply told me about her life. And it wasn't that her life was particularly glamorous, but as she told me about it, little by little, it influenced my worldview. She started corrupting me. I wasn't aware it was happening to me. Here, I need to point out that during my high school years, I knew girls who were doing bad things. I had no problem resisting because I knew I had to be on guard against girls who did bad things. But now, the enticement of the secular world was coming from a woman who could have been my mother. She was nice, she was cute, and my defenses were not up. Why would I put up a guard against someone who looked so sweet and so innocent? After a couple of years, my hashkafas became completely eroded, gone. Secular books, music, and movies became part of my life. This is a woman who never tasted this. I would spend hours discussing this material with Esther. At home, I continued playing my role like a robot, but no longer with the same dedication. I had turned into a two-faced woman. I was a two-faced woman. I was a two-faced wife. One day, my husband noticed songs on my iPhone that were not to his liking. He was shocked. Such things were not part of the life. What are you doing listening to this music? I reacted with defense. I attacked him. In the course of that argument, all my new opinions came rushing out in the open. I can do whatever I want. You're not telling me what to do. This is a woman who would never talk that way to her husband before. Only my husband's stunned expression alerted me to the fact that such words had never said between us before. This woman had corrupted her without her realizing it. From there, things only got worse. I talked with Esther about what happened at home, and she gave me advice on how to put my husband in his place. This is from a woman who was never married before. My husband was completely baffled. It was as if someone had changed the combination to the safe. What happened to his wife? He didn't know what had gotten into me. A year of fighting wore down the bond we nurtured so carefully. One day I packed up, I took the children with me, and moved back to my parents. Eventually, after an arbitration, our divorce was finalized. Look how one woman destroyed a marriage. We were going to share the custody of the children. They were going to be brought up according to specific guidelines. The agreement was signed and I received my get. Could you imagine how it just happened like that? After that, there was tension. I admit that I had fantasies about cutting off contact between my old husband and the children. My emotions were all in a tangle. I soon realized that the children were only suffering from my attitude of me trying to prevent them from going to visit him. So I allowed them to go visit him. He started a new household. He got remarried. And things settled down. Welcome to the world of being a single parent. You don't want to be there, she says. Believe me. And if you have any alternative, don't go there. I won't elaborate, she says. I'll just say that thousands of divorced women are going around today in terrible state spiritually, socially, and financially. Most of the new friends I met had begun their divorces. And in most cases, their husbands had not wanted to get divorced. The women were the ones who initiated the divorces. A respected rabbi told me that our readiness to choose divorce these days is an excellent indicator of the change that has taken place in our generation. In previous times, this rabbi, who was also a dayan, a judge, said, women fear divorce. Today, they do not fear it. I asked him if this wasn't perhaps a change in human nature, and he replied, that's just it. Human nature hasn't changed. Go and ask your friends. Are they enjoying single life? None of them. From the vantage point of 5 years later, would they make the same decision if they could go back in time? They wouldn't want to be divorced. The truth is, most women agree that had they been willing to make the effort, they might have been able to bridge the gaps and come to an understanding rather than resort to the extreme step of divorce. Exactly what we learned tonight in the wonderful lessons of Rabbi Avigdor Miller. It hurt me to see how attached my children were to their father. I'm ashamed to admit it, but if there was competition, I was the loser. Even though I'm the more quick-witted and lively one, I was the loser. But something drew them to my husband. My oldest son, who was already 15, said to me, Ima, I love you very much, but I remember the way we lived and until I was 9. I missed the mother I had then, Ima. He didn't understand why those innocent words made me cry, and cry hard. Those words touched everything that was still there in my heart, covered over as it was with weeds and brambles. Something that cried out, what happened to me? Where is the little righteous tzaddikus that I once was? 10 years passed. My former husband had 3 more children with his second wife. I must admit that she behaved wonderfully towards me. She never spoke a word against me to the children, even if I wasn't so careful myself. I would speak bad against her, but she never said anything bad about me. And whenever I would dump the kids on them, and that happened a lot because I would often have to go out, she would pick them up without saying anything to me and treat them very nicely. Sometimes I felt jealous of her. I had been in her place, and I knew what it felt like. And then she got sick with cancer. I was forced to take care of my children myself without her to share the burden. In fact, her children, my husband's new children, began coming to us more and more because there was no place for them to go. I acted like a mother towards his new children. I knew I owed it to them because she always acted so nice to my children. And for the next 2 years, she spent more time in the hospital than at home. It was such a difficult time, and everyone could clearly see where it was heading. I would bring her children to visit her from time to time. One day, when I came with my 16-year-old son, she asked him to wait downstairs because she wanted to talk to me privately. Once we were alone, she began to speak, and it was obvious she rehearsed what she wanted to say. I know my days are numbered. I know I'm going to be dying pretty soon, and I'll be leaving my husband and the 9 children. I want to thank you for being decent to me. I know you could have ruined our lives, and you didn't. But there's something more important that I want to say to you. A woman's heart knows her husband. I want you to know that my husband never got over the hurt of having the wife of his youth walk out on him. She's talking about her. He never spoke about it to me. Except for one conversation during the short time we were engaged, when I pressed him about what life was like with you. But a wife doesn't need her husband's words. She senses what he feels. I won't go into what happened. I want to talk about the future. For the good of my husband and the good of the children, I want you to remarry him after I leave this world. What an amazing request. I want you to remarry him after I leave this world. Of course, the most important thing is what's good for you. But I'd like you to think about it. It's important to me to make sure you know the truth. That's my honest wish, and I wrote it in my will. I didn't answer her. I was overwhelmed by her nobility, her refinement, her dignity. I cried, and I embraced her for a long time as we hugged each other. I came out of there with my thoughts in a jumble. I couldn't communicate with my son, and when we got home, I shut myself up in my room. The next week, we received the news that my husband's new wife had returned her soul to her Creator. I attended the Levaya, and during the Shiva, I provided meals for her husband and children. After the Shloshim, a messenger came, a rabbi we both knew, and he told me that the deceased woman had written in her will that she would like her husband to marry his first wife again. I started to cry. I told him I already knew about this. She'd spoken to me about it shortly before she passed away. He was astonished. I told him the answer was yes. I decided to be straightforward. I already paid a high enough price for ego games. I know it sounds strange, but after that, I had a few dates with my former husband. We talked about what happened and closed the door in the past. I wanted to tell him about the spiritual low that I'd fallen to, but he didn't want to hear about it. He only wanted to know if I had any aspirations to going back to being the kind of person I used to be. And I told him I did. We remarried. My husband fulfilled the rare mitzvah of remarrying the woman he had divorced, under even rare circumstances. 9 years later, we have a united, blended family. 9 children, 3 of them married. One might say that the wound has been sewn up and healed. Yet for me, the scar remains. And that is how it has to be, because I'm not willing to forget what I went through. I need to hold on to that reminder of how much a person has to be careful, watch himself, and guard themselves in order to stay on the path that the neshama desires, which is to be religious and to be close to Hashem, and not go rushing into decisions that can ruin our lives. Wonderful lessons from Avigdor tonight, and a beautiful story that encapsulates it. Again, anyone out there in the world who needs my help in shidduchim or shalom bayis or dating in any help can reach me from anywhere in the world by calling me on WhatsApp or regular phone or texting to 305-206-1916, or you can email me at drjackcohen18@gmail.com, drjackcohen18 18@gmail.com. Have a great week and a wonderful Shabbos.